They abandon you, and you run after them, not because you're weak, but because something inside you was programmed to believe that love must be earned, especially when it hurts. But ask yourself this: why do we crave most the ones who make us feel least? Why do we feel drawn to coldness, to silence, to those who look right through us, as if we were already forgotten? Carl Jung didn't see this as mere misfortune. He saw it as a pattern, a shadow play, a deeply buried script written long before your first heartbreak. We don't chase people. We chase the emotion they evoke, that sharp edge of rejection. That feels eerily familiar. We chase the cold parent, the absent father, the unpredictable mother, now reborn in the lover who pulls away just when we reach out. This is not love. It's repetition. Jung called it the unconscious compulsion to repeat. The psyche recreates old pain not to punish us, but in a twisted hope that this time we'll win. This time, the story will change. This time, the abandoner will stay. But they don't, because it was never about them. It was about a wound trying to find its way home. You think you're chasing love, but you're chasing the ghost of a need unmet. And the more they pull away, the more your shadow whispers, if you can just make them love you, maybe you're finally enough. This is the lie the abandoned child carries into adulthood, and it poisons every bond with a hidden desperation. The craving not for connection, but for redemption. You don't want them. You want to win against your own past. But what happens when you realize the game was rigged from the start? What happens when you stop chasing and start looking inward? The silence that follows is terrifying, but within it, the truth begins to stir. What if the version of you that chases isn't really you? What if it's a mask, one you were forced to wear long before you understood why? Jung called it the persona, the social self we craft to survive, to be liked, to avoid rejection. But over time, that mask doesn't just protect you, it defines you. And in doing so, it buries the parts of you deemed unacceptable. So, when someone abandons you, it doesn't just hurt. It threatens the entire identity you've spent years curating. You were kind. You were loyal. You gave everything. How could they still walk away? Because the persona was never meant to be loved. It was meant to be safe. You see, the one who begs to be chosen isn't your soul. It's your survival strategy. And it will accept breadcrumbs, humiliation, even emotional starvation if it means not being alone. But underneath that persona is the real you, raw, flawed, powerful, and most terrifying of all, honest. This is why emotional abandonment feels like death, not because of who left, but because of what it exposes, the lie that if you're good enough, love will stay. But Jung knew the truth. The unconscious doesn't care about goodness. It cares about wholeness, and the parts of you that you exiled, the anger, the need, the rage, the grief, they don't disappear. They become your shadow. And it's the shadow that drags you back toward those who wound you. Not because you want pain, but because pain is the only language your unloved self understands. Every chase is a silent scream. See me, choose me, prove I'm not worthless. But they can't, because you're not chasing them. You're chasing the part of you that you abandoned first. And unless you turn inward, the chase will never end. Because no one else can rescue what you refuse to reclaim. Why do we return to the ones who humiliate us? Why do we confuse rejection with intimacy, pain with passion? The answer is buried in your unconscious, in the place Jung called the shadow, the dark container of everything you were told not to be. You weren't born ashamed. You were made ashamed. Every time you cried and were ignored, every time you got angry and were punished, every time you reached out and were met with coldness, a piece of you was exiled, banished, hidden away to keep your persona intact. But the shadow doesn't die. It waits, and it learns. It learns that suffering gets attention, that emotional chaos feels like love, that abandonment is familiar, and therefore safe. This is why you feel alive when you're hurting, why the ones who mistreat you seem more real than the ones who are kind. Your nervous system was trained to equate unpredictability with affection. Your shadow doesn't crave love, it craves recognition. And if it must bleed to be seen, it will bleed. Every ignored message, every emotional breadcrumb, every moment of desperate overthinking feeds the hunger, not for connection, but for reenactment. Because what you truly want isn't love, it's justice. You want to make them see your worth, to bend their coldness into warmth, to reverse the wound. But the shadow doesn't play fair. It doesn't want healing. It wants completion. It wants the story to finally end differently, even if it means reliving the same trauma again and again. Jung warned us, what we do not face within, we will meet as fate. So long as your shadow goes unseen, it will guide your hands while pretending you have a choice. You don't love the abandoner. You love the chance to rewrite the pain, but pain doesn't heal through repetition. It heals through confrontation. And that confrontation is coming. You think you're falling in love. But what if you're just fulfilling a contract you never knew you signed? Jung believed that the unconscious shapes our choices long before we become aware of them. And when it comes to love, especially toxic love, we're rarely as free as we think. You're not choosing them. You're obeying a pattern, an ancient, invisible agreement between your wounds and theirs. You seek warmth in the cold, validation in the indifferent. You call it chemistry, way, but it's a magnetic pull between unresolved trauma and mirrored dysfunction. A silent pact that says, I'll play my role if you play yours. The abandoner doesn't just hurt you. They activate you. They awaken the wounded archetypes you carry, the rejected child, the unseen lover, the betrayed friend. And in return, you offer them your power, your energy, your worth. It's not love, it's sacrifice. But here's the terrifying truth, part of you wants it. Because the unconscious believes that if you can finally win the love of the one who withholds it, you'll erase every time you were made to feel unlovable. This is the contract. I'll suffer if it means someday you'll stay, but they never stay, because they were never meant to complete you. They were meant to reflect what remains incomplete, inside you. Until you recognize the contract, you'll keep signing new versions of it. Different faces, same wounds, smiles that turn to silence, affection that morphs into absence. Each one pulling you deeper into a narrative you didn't write, but keep living. Jung taught that liberation begins when we make the unconscious conscious. When we tear the contract in half and refuse to bleed for ghosts. The question is, can you break the cycle before it breaks you? We often ask, why did they leave me? But the better question is, why did I need them to stay? Jung's work reveals that we don't just fall for people, we fall into archetypes. Timeless psychological roles buried in the collective, unconscious. And one of the most seductive, most destructive is the abandoner. They appear confident, distant, emotionally untouchable. But it's not just their aloofness that draws you in. It's the myth they represent. The promise that if they choose you, then you must finally be worthy. You don't want them. You want what their approval symbolizes, salvation from your inner unworthiness. The abandoner archetype often hides behind charm or mystery. They mirror your desire but withhold affection. They give just enough to keep you hoping, never enough to feel safe. And this imbalance triggers your deepest instinct, not to flee, but to fix. You become the rescuer, the healer, the one who stays loyal no matter how distant they become. But here's the poison in the dynamic. Their withdrawal amplifies your addiction. Their silence becomes the proof that you are the problem. And so, you work harder, love louder, bleed. More quietly, Jung would say you are not in a relationship. You are in an initiation, a confrontation with the archetypal wound you carry. The abandoner is not a villain. They are a symbol, a mirror reflecting the parts of you still begging to be claimed. But chasing the abandoner only deepens your disconnection, not from them, but from yourself. The moment you stop asking, why did they leave? and begin asking, why did I need them? The archetype starts to dissolve, and in its place something terrifying and liberating emerges: self-responsibility. Because no one can abandon you more completely than you've abandoned your own truth. Rejection doesn't shatter you, it reveals you. When someone pulls away, ignores you, disappears without explanation, it's not just painful, it's disorienting. It tears open the illusion you built around who you thought you were, the illusion that you were lovable as you are. But Jung would argue that illusion was never true. It was a story your persona told to protect you from the chaos within. Because beneath the surface, you've always doubted your worth. And when rejection hits, it doesn't create that wound. It confirms it. This is the hidden function of abandonment. It forces you to face the parts of yourself you've disowned. The child who wasn't enough. The teenager who tried to be perfect. The adult who still waits for someone else to choose them. You see, rejection is not personal. It's archetypal. It reactivates ancient scripts buried in your psyche. Stories of exile, betrayal, exile from the tribe, exile from the mother. That's why it hurts so deeply. Not because they left, but because it taps into the primal terror of being unworthy of belonging. And yet, this is the turning point Jung warned us about. The moment when rejection becomes an opportunity for integration. To see yourself, not through the eyes of the one who left, but through the clarity of your own awakened vision. You are not just the abandoned. You are the one who survives abandonment. But survival is not enough. Because if you don't claim the parts of you projected onto the one who hurt you, you will find them again. In someone new. Different body. Same rejection. Until you finally realize the only thing being rejected was the lie you were living. And now, finally, you have a chance to tell a new story. They never fully loved you. And that's exactly why you can't let go. You weren't addicted to them. You were addicted to the potential of them. The fantasy, the moments they almost saw you, almost chose you, almost stayed. But almost is a drug, a cruel, precise substance that leaves just enough hope to keep you starving. And Jung would say, this craving for incomplete love is no accident. It's a symptom of an unconscious wound desperately trying to recreate its origin. Your psyche isn't drawn to peace, it's drawn to familiarity. And if love was once unreliable, chaotic, or conditional, then anything calm will feel foreign, even repulsive. That's why you reject those who are available and worship those who aren't. You say you want love, but what you really want is resolution, closure, redemption through someone else's transformation. But here's the brutal truth. You were never chasing a person. You were chasing a version of yourself that finally gets it right. You kept trying to become lovable enough for someone who was designed to leave, just like the figures in your past. And in doing so, you turned your longing into obsession. Their coldness became your mirror, their absence your script. You forgot who you were before they withheld. Jung called this possession, when an archetype or inner complex takes over your identity. You weren't being yourself. You were being the abandoned, the unchosen, the one begging for completion. But you are not incomplete. You were taught to feel that way, by the people who couldn't meet you, and by the parts of you that still believe you're only worthy if someone else says so. The high of almost love always ends the same, a crash into emptiness, and in that crash, the real healing begins. Every time they left, your adult self said, "I'll be fine." But your inner child screamed, "Not again," because it's not just the loss of a lover, it's the replay of a deeper betrayal. One that began long before romance, before adulthood, before words. The moment you first learned that love could vanish without warning. Jung taught that we all carry an inner child, a fragile, instinctive, deeply feeling part of us that never forgets emotional pain. And when abandonment strikes, it's not your rational mind that suffers. It's the child within, still waiting to be chosen, still terrified of being left behind. You tell yourself it's about this person, But the depth of your despair tells a different story, one that predates them entirely. It's the story of needing to be good enough to be kept, of walking on emotional eggshells, of proving your value in silence, with effort, with self-erasure. So when someone abandons you, it doesn't feel like loss. It feels like confirmation. Confirmation that love must be earned, and that you always fall short. But here's the tragedy Jung uncovered. This inner child has been betrayed by you as well. Every time you begged someone to love you while neglecting your own needs. Every time you accepted crumbs to avoid being alone. Every time you silenced your anger, your sadness, your truth, just to feel wanted. You repeated the original wound, not out of weakness, but out of loyalty. A loyalty to the only love you knew. Broken, inconsistent, painful. But the inner child does not need more suffering. It needs protection. It needs reparenting. It needs you to become the one who doesn't leave. No lover can do that. No relationship can replace it. And until you stop abandoning yourself, you will always chase those who do. This is not your punishment. This is your wake-up call. Let's tell the truth you've been avoiding. They were never going to save you. Not because they were cruel. Not because you weren't worthy, but because they were never meant to. That fantasy, the one where love heals every wound, where the right person finally stays, finally sees you, it was built not from reality, but from longing. Jung believed that much of what we call falling in love is really the projection of our unlived self. We don't see the other person as they are. We see them as a mirror, a myth, an answer to everything we've refused to face within. You didn't fall in love with them. You fell in love with who you hoped you could become. Through them, they were the fantasy, the portal to healing, the imagined rescuer of your abandoned soul. But fantasies demand sacrifice, and yours demanded your boundaries, your dignity, your silence. You endured coldness and begged for scraps because the dream was too sacred to destroy. You called it love. But Jung would call it inflation. When the psyche clings to an illusion so tightly, it forgets its own center. You stopped being a person and became a seeker, a worshiper, a believer in a narrative that could never sustain itself. And when they left, it wasn't just their absence that shattered you. It was the collapse of the story. The fantasy died. And with it, your hope of being rescued. But maybe that's the beginning, not the end. Because in the wreckage of that illusion lies something far more powerful. The truth that no one is coming to complete you. That the love you crave must be given by the one person who has always been absent when you needed them most, yourself. The death of the fantasy is not the death of love. It is the rebirth of your power. You don't need them to come back. You need to come back to yourself. This is the final truth Jung pointed toward, that true healing is not about getting what you were once denied, but about reclaiming the parts of you that were silenced to survive. For so long, you've mistaken abandonment for destiny, heartbreak for meaning, longing for love. But all of it, every silent rejection, every cold shoulder, every ache that twisted your chest, was a message. Not from them, from within. A summons from the shadow, asking you to stop chasing illusions and start integrating what you've disowned. Your pain, your fury, your unmet needs, your forgotten beauty. The parts you begged someone else to love are the very parts you must choose now. This is not a romantic ending. It's a spiritual one. Because when you stop running from your wounds, from your shame, from your emptiness, something sacred happens. The persona cracks, the shadow emerges, and the self begins to rise. The self, the wholeness beneath the masks, the silence beneath the noise, does not chase. It does not beg. It does not perform. It simply is. And from that place, love becomes something different. Not a reward to be earned. Not a fantasy to die for, but a natural extension of your integration. A mirror that reflects, not completes. You no longer need to be chosen, because you have chosen yourself. That is liberation.